The Macho Man Randy Savage is one of the most legendary wrestlers of WWE's golden era. Between his flamboyant outfits, his memorable matches at WrestleMania, and his iconic way of speaking, he made an impact on millions of fans and became a real star in pop culture. It's a delight to present to you on the Wrestling Paradise the final episode of this series about the journey of one of the most charismatic characters in pro wrestling history. In the previous episode that you should absolutely watch, we were able to realize how, in just a few years, the Macho Man really went from everything to almost nothing, both professionally and personally. From an emotional on-screen reunion with Miss Elizabeth to a divorce that broke his heart. From a championship title at WrestleMania in 1992 to a frustrating commentator role, being forced to let the new generation take over. In this final episode, you will learn, among other things, the moving conversation that the Macho Man had with his father when he was at WCW, a company that he almost bought. How he released a rap album in 2003 in which he attacked Hulk Hogan, but also how his paranoia took some even more shocking proportions with his new girlfriend, and the upsetting secrets behind his tragic death in 2011. And you will never guess the surreal negotiation technique he used with Eric Bischoff in his hotel room one morning, or what he was doing on the set of the first Spider-Man movie. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the amazing career of the Macho Man Randy Savage, Episode 3, let's go! From the moment he arrived at World Championship Wrestling, Randy Savage will experience some kind of update of his past in the present, and you will see that it is very surprising. Of course, it concerns in particular the one with whom he has had a love-hate relationship for years, the one he accused of having played a major role in his divorce from Miss Elizabeth, the one and only Hulk Hogan. As soon as he arrived in this new federation, Randy immediately challenged the Hulkster. But, surprisingly, at the end of the Starrcade show on December 27th, he will not attack his lifelong rival, but rather join him and reform the Mega Powers. Who could have imagined, after this storyline full of reality at the end of the 80s between them, these statements in which Randy criticized him, and these incidents outside the ring, that at the end of the year 1994, the most powerful alliance in pro wrestling history at that time would rise from the ashes? And without even talking about the animosity that has been between them for years, we must realize that at this precise moment, we therefore had the two biggest stars during the WWE Golden Era, who enabled Vince McMahon's company to break records, who are now both in the promotion that threatened the Stamford Federation like never before. We can also think that the presence of these two megastars and the way in which the two men will be used in the following years was an important factor in the 83 weeks in a row during which WCW beat WWE in the ratings. And what is quite surprising is that, contrary to what we might have thought, the leader of the Hulkamaniacs wasn't angry that the Macho Man came to WCW and could potentially overshadow him. It's even quite the opposite, since Eric Bischoff, the Federation's executive producer, revealed about it. Hulk Hogan was really the one to convince me Randy was a good asset. When the Hulk came to WCW, he wanted to bring in some of the biggest names he could. Despite what was then a relatively tense relationship between the two of them, Hulk was the one who kept after me to reach out to Randy. Bischoff even goes so far as to state that he doesn't think Savage would have come to WCW if Hogan hadn't already been there. Was the Hulkster determined to let his lifelong rival finally shine? Well, it seemed to be the case, since on November 27, 1995, at the World War III pay-per-view, the Macho Man will even become the WCW champion after having already wrestled as a team with Hogan earlier in the year. And there's another past that will be updated at that moment, since he will face none other than Ric Flair, the one he faced at WrestleMania in 1992. The latter will take the title from him, but what is even more notable is that, to give an even more personal twist to their rivalry, the Nature Boy had not only attacked Randy's father, Angelo, but had also managed to turn Miss Elizabeth against Savage. And no, you're not dreaming. Despite their divorce, the Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth were back together on TV at the beginning of the year 1996. Their professionalism can clearly be appreciated for having managed to work together at that time, both as allies and as enemies. And besides, for Randy, it was a positive experience since he said that after being able to collaborate with Elizabeth again at WCW, he had a full circle feeling, as if they had written a real end to their story, remaining good friends. In the summer of 1996, the pro wrestling world will be shocked. The superhero Hulk Hogan, the popular babyface, did his legendary heel turn to become Hollywood Hulk Hogan and form the New World Order clan. And it should be noted that Randy Savage will be one of its first victims, which therefore put an end to the Mega Powers reunion. But what I find very interesting, personally, is that this time, compared to their rivalry in the late 80s, the dynamic is reversed. The Macho Man is the babyface, the nice guy, and the Hulkster is the heel. It was an excellent way to completely renew the already very strong history there was between them. And in my eyes, the culmination of this rivalry's update, if we can call it like that, took place at the Halloween Havoc show in October 1996, when there was a match for the World Heavyweight title that Hogan was defending against Savage. I think it was really exciting in terms of storytelling, playing with the crowd from both guys, intensity. Seeing these two legends face off again in an atmosphere that was electric in the heart of the period when WCW was at its peak in terms of ratings. There really was a big fight feel. This atmosphere and this aura of a tremendous match. We will note that during a part of the match, Hulk Hogan had a wig, which Savage will eventually take off and put on in a hilarious moment. Another strength of it was that they took the time to involve the spectators more and more, to build, to tell a story. I'm thinking, for example, of that amazing sequence during which Hogan uses Miss Elizabeth, who had come to the ring, as a shield against the Macho Man. A scene that reminded their war at WrestleMania 5, where Savage did exactly the same thing with Elizabeth against Hulk. It is also very symbolic that Randy was Hogan's first real opponent once the latter turned heel. I am just disappointed by the finish that I think is unworthy of this match, with an interference by the Giant, who we will later know as the Big Show in WWE, who will make the Macho Man lose. What is also memorable in this confrontation at Halloween Havoc is the omnipresence of the Slim Jim brand, of which Savage has been the face and voice since 1993, and which he brought with him to WCW. And it should be emphasized that Slim Jim preferred to keep Savage and go to WCW rather than use another WWE superstar, which shows his strong popularity. It was even the event sponsor, and we noticed their logo on the ring post and their catchphrase on the outfit of the Macho Man, with also a special monster truck. For the record, at that time, wrestler Chris Kanyon had the bad idea to say that Savage was a has-been on Good Morning America, and apparently the Macho Man almost lost his contract with Slim Jim, since the brand was already not sure to keep him since they wondered if he wasn't washed up. And this statement by Kanyon amplified these doubts even more. After that, Randy was pissed off, and his WCW colleague Diamond Dallas Page warned Kanyon that he should apologize, which Kanyon did by leaving a message on his answering machine, because he was afraid for his life. In the end, he won't hear from him for months, and fortunately, Savage would still have a new $1 million contract. When they saw each other, the Macho Man told Kanyon that everything was okay between them, but that if his statement had cost him his Slim Jim contract, he would have given him $1 million beating. And another amazing scene involving the Macho Man had taken place around the time of Halloween Havoc. Savage had given Eric Bischoff an appointment in his hotel room at 8 AM on the day of the show to negotiate his new contract. According to Bischoff, it was a huge shoot in which there was a table with dozens of beer bottles and food. At one point, right in the middle of this negotiation, Savage told Bischoff to come into the bathroom, and the latter had the surprise to discover the Macho Man totally naked and shaved, from chin to toes. And then a room service employee knocked on the door to bring food. Bischoff opened it for him. The gentleman saw this scene, and Bischoff ended up being scared because he thought that the next day in the newspapers we could read that he and the Macho Man are in a relationship. What is certain is that this negotiation technique is original, to say the least, from Randy Savage, a few hours before his match against Hulk Hogan. And precisely, we can say that the latter impacted the Macho Man's period in WCW, and quite negatively, since in April 1998, Savage will win the heavyweight title again against Sting at Spring Stampede. But his reign will be very short, because the next day Hulk Hogan will take back the belt. And it should be noted that in 1997, Randy had joined the New World Order. It's a bit like, somehow, Savage always had to exist in the Hulkster's shadow. That there was always this black cloud above him. And it's still crazy to think that in his career, the Macho Man never had a big victory against Hulk Hogan, who will forever remain his ultimate rival. And you will see it is something that really haunted him, considering what he did several years later. In his period in WCW, what will remain perhaps Randy Savage's most memorable rivalry is the one he had against Diamond Dallas Page, DDP. You should know that the feud lasted several months in 1997 and was named Rivalry of the Year by the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. At a time when veterans and their tremendous egos ruled WCW, Randy Savage was one of the few to put a new wrestler over who deserved it, according to him. And this is something that DDP fully appreciated, and that led to a moving conversation between the Macho Man and his father Angelo, since this is what DDP told. I thought, God, who am I really grateful to? I thought, I gotta call Savage. So I picked up the phone and I got this answer machine. I go, Randy, I know you're probably gonna think this is a little corny, but I just gotta tell you, man, without you, I'm not sitting in this spot in life right now. And I want you to know, for what it's worth, I really appreciate it, man. I hope you have a really great Thanksgiving. And that was it. 2 weeks go by, I didn't even see him, and I forgot about it. Next TV taping, he comes up to me. Diamond, come here. He was just as intense behind the scenes, you know. He pulls me aside, and I'm like, oh man, what did I do? He goes, I got your message, and I gotta tell you, I played it for my dad. I said, Dad, did you ever get a message like this from one of the boys? He replied, Randy, I never even heard of anyone getting a message like this from one of the boys. Then Randy said, I just want you to know, it meant everything to me. Anyway, in the spring of 1998, after getting injured, Randy Savage will be absent from the company for almost a year. And you will see that he will be completely different when he returns, and that his life will be very crazy until his tragic death in 2011. So I strongly recommend that you stay until the end of this episode not to miss anything of his fascinating career. By the time Randy Savage stayed at home for several months because of an injury, we were in the middle of 1998, and in the WWE, the turn towards the Attitude Era was becoming bigger and bigger. Pro wrestling was becoming more and more politically incorrect, going towards an edgy and realistic side, as a mirror of society. And seeing this, we can say that Randy was smart and understood several things. First, he knew he had to adapt to this new era of sports entertainment and maybe let go of his flamboyant, very colorful or even cartoonish side. And secondly, he simply realized at his age and with all the injuries that he was no longer able to do everything he used to do and that he had to try to cover it up. So, when he returned to WCW in 1999, we could see an amazing reinvention of the Macho Man. Hang in there. From now on, his clothes will be mainly black, and most of the time he would wear a tank top, sunglasses, a necklace. He would have his hair tied up or a beret upside down. With several pounds of muscles in addition to all of that, he gave himself a second youth. And personally, I think his style was impressive. Still as larger than life, but in another register where he looked like a badass. And with a new hard rock theme song that was the complete opposite of his classic pomp and circumstance music. And that's not all. From now on, he would also be accompanied by Team Madness, namely 3 pretty blondes, including his new 22-year-old girlfriend whom he met in a Tampa-based strip club, Stephanie Bellers. But in pro wrestling, her name would be Gorgeous George. So at that moment, we remember the time when Randy chose his symbolic and legendary theme song in WWE, which was actually the same as a certain Gorgeous George, who was a pro wrestling star in the 40s and 50s and who had been a mentor for his father Angelo. Is the fact that Stephanie Bellers got the same name as this wrestler who inspired Randy purely random? The answer is no. In fact, the Macho Man was such a big fan of the original Gorgeous George that he bought the rights to his name and therefore had the opportunity to use it legally. And that's how he gave this name to his girlfriend, and that he somehow paid tribute to his idol. This total transformation and this reinvention of his character was a good thing for Randy Savage, since he will win the World Heavyweight title again in July at the Bash at the Beach show, even if, once again, Hulk Hogan won it by beating him the next day. And we can notice what will remain the last important match that Savage had at Worldwide in August 1999 against the famous basketball player Dennis Rodman. Outside the ring at that time, the Macho Man's life was full of adventures. For example, when he went backstage at a Kid Rock concert in Tampa and saw his former colleague Road Warrior Hawk, who had knocked Randy out in a fight in Japan in 1996, he did not hesitate to sucker punch him and let his girlfriend and a friend attack Hawk's wife, who will file a complaint against them. Obviously, we understood it quite well in his career. Just as Eric Bischoff himself said, the Randy Savage we saw on the screen was exactly the same behind the scenes. But did he also know how to communicate with cows? Well, that's what we might think after a mind-blowing story that his colleague Scott Steiner told. Check this out. Indeed, one day, while Steiner and Savage were driving in a van in upstate New York, the Macho Man told him to stop next to some pastures where there were about 50 cows. At that moment, Randy told him, "Do you see those cows over there? I bet I can make those cows come to me before you can." So then, Steiner gave it a try, but the cows completely ignored him. But right after that, to his great surprise, and without him even understanding what Randy had said, 3 cows came running at full speed. For Steiner, it was a mystery, because he had no idea how Savage managed this. Even today, he is convinced that the Macho Man knew these cows. As for Big Show, who was able to work with Randy in WCW, he describes him as someone very intense and eccentric. According to him, when Randy had a match, it was better to leave him alone all day, even to say hello. But at the same time, he could be one of the most energetic and funny guys outside his workplace, with a special sense of humor that made it sometimes unclear if he was serious or if he was joking. For example, one day, wrestler Jim Duggan, against whom he just had a rivalry, went to greet the Macho Man. But at that moment, the latter left, telling Duggan to go to hell, and that their rivalry was over now. Duggan was shocked because he believed they were friends, and he would only understand later that it was just humor. His relationship with Stephanie Bellers, who was 23 years younger than him, was not easy either. As you will see, Randy went even further than with Miss Elizabeth in his obsessive and paranoid side. It should be noted that, according to her, he took a lot of ecstasy and steroids when they were together, and that he did not want her to have eye contact with other wrestlers. She claims that Savage put some cameras in her house, in several rooms, and apparently it even happened that he had someone follow her. This relationship, which seemed quite toxic, ended when Stephanie Bellers got together with the guitarist of the punk rock band The Misfits, whom WCW had brought to its shows in an attempt to increase the ratings. After that, Macho Man went to one of their concerts with the intention of destroying him, and the guitarist fled after the show by going through the crowd. That time, Savage ended up releasing all his anger on the singer. It is nevertheless alongside Stephanie Bellers that he will have what will remain in a way his farewell promo to pro wrestling in the fall of 1999. A promo in which they were both completely high, according to her. He referred to the idea of passing the torch, and although there were rumors he would return to WWE, he will only have a few appearances in WCW until the company was bought by Vince McMahon. And for the record, the Macho Man could have very well bought WCW at that time, since he contacted the AOL Time Warner Group and that he was more particularly interested in the WCW video library. But it was too late, because the discussions were already going on with the WWE. The fact of the matter is that, from now on, Randy Savage could no longer wrestle in WCW, and that he seemed to be banned from WWE for multiple reasons. So, the big question is, will he disappear completely from the media bubble, or will he find new ways to get people talking about him? That's what we will see in the next chapter. But the Macho Man Randy Savage's projects outside of wrestling have been crazy, to say the least. Where some might have thought he was going to write his autobiography or open his own wrestling school, well, not at all. In 2002, we will find him in the first movie of the Spider-Man saga, the famous character whom he was a fan of when he was younger. And for the record, as we saw, at the time when his baseball club forbade him to practice other physical activities, he wrestled secretly with a mask, calling himself Spider in a nod to this superhero. He will have the role of Bonesaw McGraw, and he was so invested in this project that he was absolutely keen to perform his stunts himself, and that he got injured by being thrown several times in a row on the cage and landing on his head. No one will take away from him that he was in one of the biggest cinema hits of 2002. And on the set, he had a lot of fun, since, according to the actor Bruce Campbell, who shared his trailer, Savage often received some female guests in his dressing room, and the noises coming out of it made it easy to imagine what was going on in there. But Randy Savage's craziest project is obviously the rap album he released in the fall of 2003, entitled Be a Man, and the main track was addressed to Hulk Hogan. Can you only imagine that the Macho Man wrote a song in which he attacked the Hulkster? He said, for example, that he was a punk, a guy who danced in tights like a ballerina, that his movies and his acting were trash. His intention was clear. He was challenging his lifelong enemy, and in an interview he even mentioned the idea of facing him in a real fight at WrestleMania 20. The Macho Man was full of optimism for his album, which also contained a song in tribute to his deceased friend, Mr. Perfect. And he predicted it would sell 50 million copies. He even met the rapper 50 Cent and started preparing a second album, which will never be released, since he will only sell 15,000 copies of the first one. As for Hulk Hogan, they will once again have a memorable interaction during the short period when Savage went to TNA in 2004. The promotion where we will also have what will officially remain the last match of his career, teaming up with Jeff Hardy and AJ Styles against Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. Backstage at a show, the Hulkster went to see the Macho Man, who was apparently drinking the whole day. While Hogan was peaceful and speaking politely despite the song in which Randy had attacked him, the latter refused any reconciliation. And when the Hulk was a man, like Savage wanted him to be in his rap album and offered him to go outside, Randy refused. A paradoxical behavior, to say the least. And for the record, when he was starting at TNA, Savage asked the officials to give him the title as soon as his next pay-per-view appearance, which he was obviously refused. What is certain is that at this time of his life, the Macho Man was more unpredictable than ever. Unfortunately, what obviously had an influence on Randy Savage in 2003 and the following years was the tragic death of Miss Elizabeth on May 1st, the woman he loved for many years, at only 42. The one whom the Macho Man wanted to protect against the dark side of the pro wrestling business when they were together, ended up being a victim of it. While she was in a relationship with wrestler Lex Luger, who abused alcohol himself and who was previously arrested for domestic violence towards her, she died after mixing alcohol and painkillers. Randy will tell Elizabeth's family they could ask him anything they wanted, and according to Ric Flair, Savage never managed to move on the inside after their divorce. In the Nature Boy's eyes, Randy still loved her, and he thinks it must have been horrible for him to see her marry a lawyer, and then get together with Lex Luger back when they were in WCW. A few years later, in March 2010, Randy's father, Angelo, the one who played such an important role in this intensity he developed over the years, will pass away. Not long before, the Macho Man was paying for trips to Europe to his parents, and had offered a Cadillac to his father for his 70th birthday. He was really his hero, and when he had renovated a weight room in a school, he demanded that it was renamed after his father. Randy's mother said that after Angelo died, he came home and punched holes in the wall. On a happier note, in May 2010, a few weeks after his father's death, Randy Savage will live an event that seems to have had a deep impact on him, given what happened after it, which we are going to talk about. Indeed, he is going to marry his first love, Lynn, from when he was in high school and still playing baseball. The way they found each other after all these years is quite remarkable, since Lynn's best friend went to Randy at the gym and simply asked him if he wanted to meet her. Their wedding will take place on the same beach where they met once. The Macho Man was happier than ever the following months, and we can imagine that under the influence of this relationship, but also of these tragedies over the years, he evolved as a human being, since he himself said, "I've changed a lot in my lifetime. I was worried about my wife then. It's very hard to let go, but you've got to." These trials and this change were visible in what happened the following months. In July 2010, he made a video appearance at the San Diego Comic-Con Festival, where he presented the first new action figure of him under the WWE license since 16 years. So, the Macho Man seemed to be getting closer to Vince McMahon's company after all these years, and a reconciliation seemed possible. It should also be emphasized that at this time of his life, he was also involved in charity work, for example, teaching children how to train. But the real ultimate reconciliation that Randy Savage will be the one with his lifelong enemy, more than 20 years after the Mega Powers storyline, more than 10 years after their WCW battles, and about 7 years after this rap song. A reconciliation with Hulk Hogan, finally! Apparently, they had the same doctor, and when Randy saw him, he decided it was time to be in peace with the past, and hugged him. They buried the hatchet, and they promised to see each other again very soon. But unfortunately, it will never happen. On May 20th, 2011, Randy Savage was in his car with his wife, 1 year after their wedding. The day before, Randy was still laughing with his brother. Not so long ago, when he had accompanied his mother to the doctor and that the latter wanted to do a checkup on Randy to make sure it was not a hereditary problem, he didn't want to do it, while, according to the doctor, it could have prevented what is going to happen. While he was driving, he suffered a heart attack and lost control of the vehicle, to finally lose his life at the age of 58. His former colleagues will be devastated by his death, and his ashes will be scattered on his property, just as he himself did for those of his dog Hercules, whom he loved very much. Unfortunately, while this beginning of a reconciliation with the WWE seemed to lead to a return, he did not have the opportunity to come back and definitely have closure. Apparently, while he was still alive, Randy was contacted by Vince McMahon to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. But the Macho Man refused to be inducted without his father and brother, a refusal that clearly shows how his family was more important than anything for him, including his personal glory. In the end, in 2015, he will nevertheless be a part of it posthumously, a much-deserved honor for this legend, whose career has never ceased to surprise us. And who better than his brother Lanny, the one who has always accompanied him in this long journey from the beginning, to take a step back on the Macho Man's life. Randy took it much more seriously, evidently, than I did. Because I have a thing where, if I don't have a good match, I don't beat myself up over it. But Randy would. It would bother the hell out of him. But the thing is, that's why I'm still alive and he's not. Because you wear yourself out if you're going to care that much. I consider myself luckier than him, because he had the match, but I lived to tell about it. And this is how our series about the amazing career of the Macho Man Randy Savage ends. Throughout this rich journey, we were able to appreciate his intensity, his memorable matches against Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, and Ricky Steamboat, just to name a few, and his importance in the entire golden era of the WWE and in pro wrestling history more generally, which he has largely helped to become mainstream. He was able to create a unique character, and through his mentality and perfectionism from an early age to get the best out of his opponents. Of course, he also seemed to have some flaws as a human being, but it's nice to see he seemed to have finally found peace at the end of his crazy life. After diving into his career, I have a debate for you. In your eyes, what is his best match? We invite you to come and give your opinion. It will be interesting to talk about it together in the comments and to share our points of view. We can say that this topic raises a lot of questions. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay in the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?